The Hellfire Gala has come and gone for the X-Men, and it was certainly an event worth talking about, even if it was just for the fashions, if not necessarily for the story itself, or lack thereof. The gala wrapped up in X Factor number 10 with an ending that uncoincidentally leads directly into the next mutant storyline, the trial of Magneto. I already have a video where I predicted some theories about what I thought this trial might have been about, but with the murder of the Scarlet Witch now confirmed, I may just have to take a moment to upload some new thoughts about it. In this video, however, I'll be doing a little roundup of what the Hellfire Gala was all about, including super short reviews of how the night went in each of the tie-in titles, and I'll also give my personal thoughts on what I thought of the storyline as a whole. Lead up to the Hellfire Gala was pretty hyped up from a fan engagement marketing perspective. There was promise of it being a night to remember, but for months the main focuses seemed to be the X-Men election and who'd be wearing what. For the election, fans were allowed to vote and help determine who would join as the final member of the new X-Men team. With an overwhelming majority, Polaris was the victor of that vote, and even though the reveal was spoiled by Marvel themselves by telling us she won the election months before the Hellfire Gala took place, we still got a really awesome splash page of the new team during the formal announcement in its issue. I'm not gonna lie, I totally fell into the fashion frenzy of it all too, and I actually think the Met Gala spin was one of the highlights to come out of this event overall, now that it's all over and done with. Marvel released a free book with designs of everyone's outfits in it, and the X community itself went crazy with fan art aplenty as well. As I said, all of this stuff happened months before any of the official Hellfire Gala issues were even released, so by my account, the event was already a success by this point, as I was having so much fun engaging with all of this content that was just essentially marketing material. In terms of the event itself, the Hellfire Gala was organized by Emma Frost as like a "we're here, we're mutant, get used to it" coming out party of sorts about Krakoa for the rest of the world to see. It was the first time the Mutant Nation allowed human guests to pass through their gates en masse, and pretty much all of the big names were there, like esteemed world leaders and A-list superheroes and even hotshot celebrities. Schmoozin' and boozin' weren't the only things on the repertoire though, and the Hellfire Gala was also a front to formally announce the members of the brand spankin' new X-Men team and to demonstrate the actual power of Krakoa by showing everyone how the mutants have just terraformed Mars and claimed it for themselves. Marvel promised that the Hellfire Gala would change the lives of the X-Men forever, and even though I don't really think the story fully delivered on that promise, I do think that the development of Arakko moving to Mars is a cool one, and I hope that it will finally lead to the Arakkai mutants getting some page time, because they really haven't done a whole lot of anything since X of Swords concluded. If I'm being quite honest about my feelings on this event, I don't think that it was really very strong from a story perspective. It felt like a whole lot of nothing happened for like a good 75% of it, which isn't a very good ratio given that there was like 13 issues involved. Much like the X of Swords crossover before it, it felt like the story was flatlining from the very beginning, right up until like close to the end when things started to ramp up, and then bam, it was over. This seems to be a pattern with these Krakoa era events where instead of just giving us the contained story they want to tell, they milk it out over a multitude of issues, which I would normally enjoy because I just love having more content, except the story engine never seems to have enough pump behind it to be worthy of being dragged out for so long. If there are twists and turns along the way, then sure, give me the 13-issue mega event of my dreams, but if it's just the same linear narrative slowed down and pulled out like taffy over these issues, then it's no good to anybody, and it does a total disservice to the story as a whole. Even though I didn't think that the Hellfire Gala was a great event, and that there was like a weird emphasis on Easter egging in celebrities with the party scenes, which I don't know if anyone really cared about that at all, I don't think the gala was terrible, and most of the issues were at least cute and fun to read, if not a bit frustrating from a story momentum perspective. My top issues were probably S.W.O.R.D, X-Force, Planet Size, and X-Corp for various reasons, but mostly because I felt that these issues did a good job of giving us something meaty to read. Some of the other issues were fine too, and others I didn't really think were all that great at all, but let's just dive right into them and talk about what happened in each one. Marauders. The gala kicks off in Marauders number 21, and this issue acts very much like an opening course. It's setting the stage, welcoming the guests, and it's pretty much just an Emma-centric issue of her running around, making sure that everything is going as smoothly as can be. It lays the groundwork for a lot of things that are yet to be revealed, which I like, and so it's pretty busy in that sense. But what it lacks is giving us like an actual self-contained story in this issue specifically. I was really frustrated when I was reading it because I felt like with all of the build up to this party, with those months and months of marketing, the premiere issue would start us off with a bang, but it's the exact opposite. Even though lots was kind of happening, it felt slow and uneventful because ultimately it was just characters standing around and talking without much of any real plot happening. I do think that was the point of this issue though, and that the issue was very much only supposed to be like an appetizer of sorts, so it accomplishes that mission, but I hate it that that's what its mission was to begin with. There are still plenty of fun little things that happen in this issue, though none of them really scratch the story itch that I was craving here, but they give me at least a momentary satisfaction. Some highlights for me that happen in this issue include Mr. Fantastic whispering something nasty to Xavier, which we don't know what that is yet, and Xavier reiterating that Franklin is a human and not a mutant, which only leads me to believe that they are just lying about that and he is going to be a mutant after all. Rhapsody also made her grand return in this issue and teamed with the Psychics to give a telepathic concert, which looked awesome. Banshee hints that he's been asked to join the Hellfire Club, or at least Emma's Marauders. It's nice to see these two characters interact again since they haven't really seen much of each other since they co-led Generation X, and I think their dynamic was always a fun one to see. There's a funny moment when a Shi'ar captain interrupts Emma as she's talking to Dr. Doom. She's assuring him that the X-Men aren't trying to conquer Earth or anything, and the Shi'ar guy literally congratulates her on having conquered Earth. I like it anytime anyone can catch Emma off guard. She's always usually so in control of situations, and I love that assured cockiness about her, but it's more humanizing watching her flub up every now and again. The Shi'ar captain says he brought her request, which she can't remember making, and Christian helps her out by tending to it, so it's setting up for some sort of trap or something, which we'll find out in a later issue. I loved watching the Cuckoos make a unilateral decision to invade Wilhelmina Kensington's mind on their own. They make her remember something, which obviously upsets her, though we don't really know what that thing is yet either. And even though the issue was full of it, I liked the cheeky nod to the banal conversation that Kyle and Guardian were having, where Kyle doesn't remember something that Mac had just told him moments ago. It's too true for schmoozing at these events where everyone is talking but no one is actually listening, and I have definitely been on both sides of that before. I was a bit heartbroken after Emma called the Inner Circle together for a meeting and there was no sign of Selene there. I guess the Black Queen mantle really has been abandoned by her, and there is only one head monarch of each color now. Sebastian overhears a bunch of ambassadors making plans to form an alliance, which feels kind of like it's going to be the culmination of a lot of the various human governmental threats that the various X-teams of Krakoa have faced since the inception. Some sort of governmental superpower to take down Krakoa, I guess. It's interesting that Sebastian is the one to overhear this, though, as he's not one to necessarily play on the side of the Angels, so for me it becomes a question of will he chip in with them or will he protect his mutant brethren? I'm definitely thinking the latter, as I'm guessing this is where he turns over a new leaf and starts to play good guy for a while. This issue ends with all the humans freaking out about something, which we later learn is the announcement of the mutants having terraformed Mars. It's suggested that humanity will now have all new reasons to band together and thwart the mutant menace, since terraforming the Red Planet is quite the power flex, and most of them see it as a threat. This was a fine end to the issue, as we all knew a big announcement was going to come anyway, but I think that what I wish had happened here was some sort of twist would have occurred with something that I didn't already know and expect. Instead, this issue was a very linear starter issue to the gala, and there's not much else to say about it other than that. I think this will work fine in the collected Hellfire Gala trade paperback edition because I can totally see how its function to whet a reader's palate can work in that instance, but definitely as like a weekly reader of comics, I was left feeling underwhelmed and disappointed by it, and like the gala got off to a very slow start. X-Force. The next issue is X-Force number 20, and I was really pleasantly surprised by it. In this issue, Beast tries to bug a bunch of countries using the Terra Verde telefloronics, but surprise, surprise, the green technology malfunctions and turns hostile, and X-Force has to respond to stop the threat before it gets out of control. Beast gets a lot of hate from the X fandom for how he's been behaving ever since becoming a member of X-Force these days, but I personally really enjoy seeing this dark side of him. He's a total jerk, but from a conflict standpoint, I think that's a really great thing, and it's the most interesting his character has been for me in like decades. I love it when he talks down to Domino in this issue as if she hasn't been involved in more X-Forces than Beast ever has. He's just such a condescending egomaniac, and for Beast's current character portrayal, that's perfect. I think there is also an illusion of some sort to him being not totally in control of himself. Maybe he's been infected by the Terra Verde himself, and so that would go on to explain why he's been behaving so shady these days, but I mean, that's just conjecture on my part. I don't really know. In addition to the main telefloronic threat, we also get a Deadpool cameo, which kind of acts as like Wolverine's side quest in this issue. Even though I'm not really a Deadpool kind of guy, I can appreciate his level of witty banter and senseless violence, and I think adding him in here creates a greater complexity to the plot, and it does a good job of taking Wolverine out of the main story, which is a great development for me because then the rest of the team gets to shine. What I really appreciated out of X-Force was all of the action that it gave me, which was something Marauders did not give me. I mean, yeah, X-Force had its leggy moments too at the beginning with that Tony Stark and Quentin Quire confrontation, but I mean, after that, it's all just smooth sailing. We also discover that the surprise Shi'ar gift that we learned about in Marauders was some logic diamonds, and that Christian is going to be transporting them to the cradles of Krakoa using the Marauder ship. Sage has been an interesting character for me in X-Force, and I like watching her getting more and more disenchanted with her role. A few issues ago, it hinted that she was also becoming an alcoholic, and that probably has something to do with the boredom of what she feels these days. I loved Sage as Tessa, but was only ever lukewarm to her as Sage the Living Computer, so I really hope that this is building up to Sage deciding to taking on more of an active role on the team. I don't really buy that she'd be as threatened by Emma as she came across when Emma confronted her about the Beast's telefloronics. There was never any love lost between Tessa and any of the queens at the Hellfire Club, so I don't see why that dynamic would suddenly change so much now that they both work with the X-Men. I actually didn't even buy that Emma would just casually have deduced Beast's entire plan either. So even though she could be spotted eavesdropping on Beast here and there throughout the party, it's not like she could hear Sage or use her telepathy whilst in her diamond form, so I don't really understand how she even managed to figure it all out and piece it all together, but I mean, whatever, it's a story conceit that I just have to accept. Overall, I thought this was a really great issue because we got a legitimate threat in the malfunctioning Terra Verde telefloronics, and we got some great action in the Deadpool fight and more character development and pretty much the entire main cast, and really, that's what you want in a comic book. X-Force number 20 was a great issue and really helped to give momentum to an otherwise slow start to the Hellfire Gala. Hellions. Hellions has been one of my favorite new books to come out of the Krakoa era, mostly because I really enjoy this cast, and I think the characterizations are generally quite well done. Unfortunately, I don't think that Hellions number 12 really added anything of value to the Hellfire Gala event as a whole. It's very much like Marauders in that it was just a bunch of characters standing around talking. There are some fun moments and there are some minor moments of character developments too, but overall, this was like a giant miss for me in terms of a tie-in issue with its own standalone story. The basic premise is that the Hellion squad have crashed the gala and are causing a sort of a ruckus. There's no real external conflict for them to worry about. It's really just like a slow burn of the Hellions dealing with their own drama and the drama that they feel from others on Krakoa, which in and of itself has some merit, but it just felt like it slowed the momentum of the event for me after coming off of X-Force. There's at least some action towards the end, though, when the Hellions start fighting, though it did feel a bit forced for me, especially Cat's Eye and Roulette jumping empath. Both those girls were brought up better than this at the Massachusetts Academy, so they should know that Emma's Hellfire Gala is not the place for this kind of behavior. It just kind of felt like an excuse to air some dirty laundry without actually developing anything from it. I'm a flip-flopper on if I like goofy, charismatic, campy Mr. Sinister as opposed to dark, evil, shadowy Mr. Sinister like he was first introduced. Sometimes I like it, like when he's shading Iron Man and Captain America in this issue and pretending to not know the difference between either of them, but then there are other times where I just miss his truly evil self. I think the snarky villain trope is fun, and I like that as a character portrayal in general, but when it comes to Sinister, sometimes I just think that other villains like Velasco and Despair were doing it first, and at times doing it better. I do like that it sets him apart from the other main X-villains of the Quiet Council this way, but I only really think it works for him well when he's behaving eccentric whilst in the throes of a masterful plan, as opposed to just being eccentric overall. Like, this rivalry he has with Exodus about whose cape is more fabulous is just so overdone, and I'm tired of it. The main point of this story, I think, was to sow the seeds of the upcoming Inferno storyline. Everything about Alex in this issue leads me to believe that he is going to throw in with Mystique when the time comes, as he's been looking for explanations on why Madeline Pryor isn't being resurrected, but he hasn't been getting the straightforward answers that he wants. I didn't really like how meek Alex was portrayed here, because he was very much walking on eggshells with everybody, but I think he, as a character, might have been doing that on purpose. Since he has the reputation of being hot-headed, he knows that he can't just barge up to Charles and Magneto and demand answers for his questions, because he'll never get them that way. So instead, he's being polite and skirting around the main issue while he talks to them, but I mean, it's still super transparent and it gets him nowhere. I think that what I would have preferred would have been some sort of verbal cue from Alex in this issue, saying that he knows he needs to be calm as a conversational strategy in order to get what he wants, just to show us how his mind is working. I mean, I'm just assuming that this was a tactic of his to come across as together and in control, which I really hope it was, because otherwise it's just him being super off character, but without him confirming it either way, we really don't know for sure. I enjoyed watching the miscreants of the Hellions crash the party, even though I think it is such a shame that Nanny didn't get the formal Hellfire Gala outfit treatment from Jumbo. I really enjoyed her creepy toast to Sinister, and I think that's hinting that she's going to seek to overthrow him for all of his mistreatment that he has shown children in the past. Nanny is my ultimate favorite character in this Hellion squad, and I totally cannot wait for her eventual uprising here. Something that didn't really land with me in this issue was the humor. I felt like a lot of the jokes weren't coming from the characters, but were coming from the writer, and were just delivered in a way that we know them to be delivered in everyday modern life, but weren't necessarily adapted to a way that the characters would say them. Things like Havoc pretending not to see Greycrow by shouting loudly, and Nanny getting super trashed and vulgar all could have been really funny if they had been honed a bit and distilled to represent the characters, instead of just being what I felt were stock jokes that were basically just copy and pasted onto the page. I mean, overall, this issue did plenty for the team dynamics themselves, so it was fine in that way, but it's a shame that it got roped into being a tie-in to the Hellfire Gala event without really having any impact on the gala itself whatsoever. Excalibur. I was split on how I felt about Excalibur number 21. On the one hand, there were story developments and there were plot points that moved forward, but then it also just kind of felt off. It's not as bad as characters just standing around talking and doing nothing, although there is a lot of that in this issue too, but it suffers again from things happening that just don't really seem as epic as the writer wants them to be. The main point of this issue is to establish that the UK is cutting diplomatic ties with Krakoa, and so all of the mutant drugs and pharmaceuticals and whatnot are going to be returned, and the Krakoan gates are going to be shut down. They threaten to take Betsy's lighthouse away too, but by the end of the issue, a little bit of druid pizzazz has moved the lighthouse off of UK soil and onto an offshoot of Krakoa, so now Excalibur can pretty much operate free from any worry of British intelligence interference. The other biggie that happened was at the end of this issue, where Pete Wisdom was sacrificed by Coven Aqaba in order to free Morgan Le Fay from her prison and take control of a gate, so it looks like Morgan is back and ready to invade Krakoa. I think the Morgan developments were my favorite parts of this issue. Even though I don't care for her as a character, I see the value in having her released as a threat to Excalibur and in establishing the Coven's strength. The big thing I didn't like in this issue was actually how the characters interacted with one another. I can totally get down with character-driven dialogue that deepens character relationships, but I just felt a real disconnect with this one, particularly with Richter. I know he's upset about Apocalypse moving away, but him being like this level of obsessed with him so as not to even enjoy a party just feels like hella off. And then him being super moody to Shatterstar as well was just like not reading as Richter. Instead, what it felt like was a character idea that was being imposed onto Richter in order to move the story ahead in a specific way. He just felt really inauthentic, and I mean, I'm a bit biased because I hate all this druid stuff that's happening with him, but I'm generally pretty fair and impartial with my analyses, and this was just not Richter's best moments. Even afterwards, when Shatterstar surprises him with some beers, Richter's like just as moody as before. Like as if Shatterstar has to apologize to him and suggest that they go for a drink instead of just surprising him at the party. That is so not their dynamic as a power couple. Richter is all about that wild life too. Not necessarily as wild as Shatterstar, but definitely not as formal as him needing like a, you should have called me first so that we could get together privately. I'm just not buying this imposter as being Richter. Also, to me, my druids made me cringe so much. The rest of the Excalibur team continues to do nothing in this issue as well, although they looked great in this art while they did it. It's announced that Rogue is leaving the team and that Gambit's going to stay behind. Jubilee is still obsessed with that baby of hers, and she seems to have no other personality anymore beyond that of mother. But at least Captain Britain is coming into herself. She's still coming across a bit of just like an angry woman, but something about it feels more in line with Betsy's point of view now that she is the one true, established, undisputed Captain Britain, although her constantly having to prove that about herself and remind people about it is starting to come across as one note. I did love Ambassador Brousseau calling out Charles on his telepathic prying tendencies, and I wanted to love seeing Megan and Brian at the party, but 2 full pages dedicated solely to hinting that Megan is pregnant is ridiculous. Like, come on, that's 1 or 2 panels tops. I am hoping that Betsy inviting Rachel to the lighthouse while they were dancing is a hint that Rachel may be rejoining the team. Now that X Factor is done, she has nowhere else to go, and Excalibur feels like a very natural fit for her. The more we can inch closer to that OG Excalibur lineup, the happier I certainly will be. Even though having 2 telepaths on the team would kind of feel pretty redundant, having Rachel there would at least give them some personality edge after having lost Rogue in the X-Men election. Overall, this was an okay issue, and I'm certainly happy that there were plot developments amidst the standing around doing nothing. Excalibur as a whole just isn't really my vibe these days, ever since it really doubled down into the mutant magic shtick, but I'm always looking to be proven wrong every time I pick up an issue, so here's hoping that whatever the new team looks like will help shake things up a bit. X-Men. By the time X-Men number 21 was released, I was expecting some serious movement on the overall Hellfire Gala plot, especially since this issue was marketed as like a red line issue, which I assume means that these are the most important issues to pick up in terms of grasping the main plot. Unfortunately, I didn't really feel like we got much of anything aside from what we already knew was going to happen, which was the reveal of the new X-Men team, which is not a surprise to anybody because the team had already been publicly announced by Marvel months ago. I know they had to announce the team in order to help market the solicits for future issues, but because it was already spoiled, it ultimately ruined the big reveal of this issue and made it feel kind of redundant. I had hoped that because everyone already knew who the team was going to consist of already, that wasn't going to be the main focus of this issue, and that Marvel would have planned to have done something different, but alas, that was not the case. At the very least, we did get that gorgeous splash page of the new squad, which, I mean, it is just gorgeous. Other than announcing the new team, other things that happen in this issue include Magneto and Xavier offering Namor a seat on the Quiet Council and him refusing to take it, and the Omega Mutants going off in secret as Emma connects everyone's minds to watch the fireworks on Mars. But, I mean, really, that's it. It's very much just a vamping issue that was riddled with celebrity cameos, and I don't think that it serviced the Hellfire Gala event as a whole much at all. There was some pretty art in it, but I hate to say that overall it's probably one of my least favorite issues of this entire event, if only because nothing outwardly happened to make it interesting that we didn't already know was coming. Children of the Atom. I'm just going to come right out and say it. Children of the Atom number 4 is a peripheral tie-in book at best. In this book, the kids try to find a way to sneak into the Krakoa gates in order to join in all the Hellfire Gala fun. In this issue, the kids attach bits of Cole's jersey onto them, hoping that his mutant DNA will grant them safe passage through the gates. They don't get the chance to try it out though, and they end up getting captured by the U-Men for some organ harvesting. Luckily, JJ managed to evade capture, and he shows up at the end with an array of X-Men ready to save them. I'm sure there's some sort of reveal to come where this is like not the real X-Men or something, because none of them are wearing their Hellfire Gala outfits, so I'm not sure where this fits continuity-wise, because it's supposed to be taking place during the night of the gala, I thought, so I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. When this series was first announced, I was extremely vocal about my distaste for the idea of mutant sidekicks. I thought it was literally just going to be a derivative form of established mutants learning how to use their new powers. I was very happy to be proven wrong in this instance though, and I think the series actually had a really strong start with the first 2 issues, although it's getting a bit muddled now and I'm at the point where I just want some answers. The voices of these characters are all pretty distinct and strong, and although the wokeisms that reverberate in the script can be a bit of a groaner, I don't find it too overpowering, and I like that the kids have differences of opinions on ethics and stuff, and it's not just like one size fits all with clear cuts of right versus wrong. This issue really does nothing for the Hellfire Gala plot as a whole, and I don't think it really was supposed to, but if you remove that from the equation, then it does just a fine job of dealing as another tale in this mysterious Children of the Atom saga. Planet-sized X-Men. By the time Planet-sized X-Men came around, it was pretty obvious that the mutants were going to be taking over Mars, but as I said before, it was a fun twist that they did it in honor of Arakko instead of Krakoa. I totally expected the X-Men were going to move to Mars, which I wasn't really looking forward to, but moving Arakko there instead I think offers up way more unique story points. This was a really beautiful issue that was a complete thought from first page to the last page. Did a lot happen in it? No, not really. Literally, it was pretty much just one giant thing that happened, and that one thing was drawn out over the course of the entire issue. But I don't think that that's a bad thing in this case. I certainly don't think this issue was necessarily worthy of the hype that it received going into it, because I wouldn't say that the X-Men's lives have changed forever because of it. Really, it was just Arakko's life that has changed forever. It was a really nice, standalone, solid issue with glorious art, and it introduced a fun way to get to know some of the other Arakkai mutants as they helped the X-Men transform Mars into a livable planet. We got to learn more of the sensibilities of the Arakko mutants as well, in that they would have ultimately caused a war between humans and mutants had they stayed on Earth, so really the X-Men did this for everybody. I really enjoyed watching the Omegas work together to make the planet whole. We don't see it very often where pretty much all of them are together working on the same project, heroes and villains alike, so it seemed like a pretty special moment. And bringing up Franklin's non-mutantness yet again at this gala really makes me think that him not being a mutant isn't the case whatsoever. The other big things to come out of this issue was Storm being hinted as the official Earth representative for Mars, and Jamie Braddock birthing a second S.W.O.R.D station over its orbit. As I said, overall, only one thing was really accomplished here in this issue, and that was terraforming Mars, but they did it in a way that gave us some layers and some things to look forward to in future issues, so for that reason, this was one of my favorite books of the entire Hellfire Gala. New Mutants. New Mutants was another book that didn't really add much in terms of the mythos of a Hellfire Gala story. It was basically just a bunch of them feeling down in the dumps for various reasons while being annoyed by one of the human guests at the party. Nothing much happens story-wise again, which is annoying at this point, but at least there's a big revelation at the end where Gabby shows up dead and it's insinuated that the Shadow King is the one who killed her. I personally don't think that that's what happened, as even though it looks like the Shadow King has been up to no good, I think it's a misdirection and he's actually turning over a new leaf and is going to be painted as a mentor for the younger kids. My favorite character in this issue is Warlock, and in my opinion, this is primarily a Warlock story. He's feeling insecure about Doug spending so much time with his new wife, Bay, and he basically feels replaced by her. So he's trying to replace Doug with a new soul friend and is trying to figure out which of the New Mutants best suits that role. I think Warlock has been severely underused in Krakoa, and so I very much welcomed him front and center in this issue. I will never forgive the gall of Marvel just using him as a straight-up sword in X of Swords without there being any sort of layered story there for him and Dougie. Ultimately, Warlock and Doug reconnect by the end of this issue though, which is nice, but I think I would have preferred some sort of unintentional rejection by Doug just for the drama of it all. Other than that, I mean, there's nothing else much to report here. Danny and Wolfsbane stand around talking for a while, which really drags out the issue, and there's an underwhelming splash page of Karma arriving to the party in her outfit that's just okay, if you ask me, and I guess the big climax is when Karma tells off the Human for being annoying. The Human is a guy who keeps bothering the New Mutants, and he has like this really grating mean girl style personality, which I understand he's supposed to be that type of person, but it really goes into overkill and he comes across as just like a forced one-dimensional trope. I mean, that's basically what Karma says in her big speech to him, so I'm glad the writers are at least aware of what they're doing here. I think I understand the message they're sending, but it doesn't really land for me, only because I assume this guy is just a one-off plot device, and so I don't really take any of what happened very seriously. Even if nothing really happened in this book, it was a cute thing to watch the New Mutants flit about the party. It was another issue that focused on team dynamics, much like Hellions did, but for a New Mutants title, that kind of feels suitable. A lot of the New Mutants books mostly are just about team dynamics anyway, so I'm not as offended seeing no actual plot moving forward in this book as I was in some of the others. X-Corp. X-Corp is the new book on the block these days. The first issue was a bit of a slog to get through, which is not very surprising because what else is a corporation book supposed to be about other than board meetings and corporate takeovers, none of which are very exciting content. Even though I don't have high hopes for the success of X-Corp as a book in the long run, I hope it proves me wrong because I do like the team, if not the concept, and I actually found this second issue to be pretty thrilling. The basic premise is that M and Angel are schmoozing with potential business partners at the gala as they try to fill out their board of directors. They meet with questionable folks like Mastermind and Selene, and then later they fight Fenris, and Mastermind proves just how valuable he can be after he hides Warren's transformation into his evil alter ego so that he can be officially named as a member of the X-Corp board. The themes of this book are all about the corporate images and the moralities behind business decision-making, which, again, not super fun stuff as far as comic books are concerned, but I think this issue did a good job of making it seem exciting. There was a battle and fun dialogue, and mutant powers were used, and it just set a bunch of good things up for future story points. I mean, it pretty much hit all of the marks I'm looking for in a comic. I think the only reason it was successful, though, was because of the large amount of guest stars it had. Even though I think M's character is super compelling and almost enough to have a comic series of her own, the meaty conflicts between the heroes of X-Corp and the shady villains that they meet and fight was really what gave this issue its backbone. And I think X-Corp will have to rely on instances like this for future issues too, in order to maintain this momentum before it inevitably falls back into the slog of board meetings and corporate takeovers. This issue didn't really tie into any overarching Hellfire Gala plot point, but because Multiple Man is literally working the entire party in every other issue of this event, it kind of felt like we were given like a behind-the-scenes look at it in this book. In that way, I didn't mind taking a detour from the main Hellfire Gala story because it was interesting watching Jamie's perspective of things as the hired help. Overall, I was really pleasantly surprised by this issue, and I think it did a great job of achieving a decent Hellfire Gala tie-in while still giving us a contained story of its own. Wolverine. Wolverine number 13 is pretty much a continuation of the X-Force issue that came before, and the Terra Verde takeover comes through in full force. The ambassadors are out for revenge over the mutants having compromised their telefloronics, and X-Force is basically trying to handle the situation while still keeping it quiet from all the other guests. In the end, the Terra Verde attack is halted, and they and Krakoa come to new terms somewhat, but it's basically just Terra Verde rejecting Krakoa's trade deal, and X-Force having to reprogram the telefloronics back to the way they originally were. I really liked this issue because it was full of action and it still served the Hellfire Gala overall. I mean, it's kind of a cheat issue because it was basically just X-Force 2.0, and so it's not really fair that this story got 2 issues, whereas most of the other stories only got 1. But I think because the first X-Force issue was so good, I can't complain about a second one here where it wraps everything up. We got more great intra-team dynamics, and a highlight for me was Sage rebelling against Beast. Even though I really like Beast's characterization these days, I love a cold Sage slap, and this moment of her slapping Beast felt very much like the Sage I know who would never let anyone talk down or belittle her. I also really enjoyed Beast feeling like he doesn't have to explain himself to Emma. I love Emma, but things go her way far too often, and it's nice to see a character feel just as high and mighty and superior about himself as Emma does about herself. Another little tidbit that happens in this issue is the death of Christian Frost. It's a callback to that X-Force issue where he was taking the logic diamonds in the Marauder to deposit them around Krakoa. In the end, the ship is on fire, and it's somehow made its way to Madripoor, though we don't know who the assailant is yet. This is a setup for whatever the next arc is going to be, but I'll be honest, I had actually forgotten that Christian was even doing this by the time this issue rolled around. I can see why they waited this long to finish the storyline though, because by the time this issue rolled around, the Hellfire Gala event was starting to wind down, and when an event usually winds down in Krakoa, that means things are finally starting to happen. Overall, I thought this Wolverine issue was really great, even though it didn't really focus on Wolverine, the character, too much. But that's just an added bonus to me because it just means we got another X-Force story out of it, which has been the surprise hit of the Hellfire Gala books for me. S.W.O.R.D. S.W.O.R.D number 6 is definitely what I'm talking about when it comes to moving ahead the plot of the Hellfire Gala. Now that Mars has been terraformed, S.W.O.R.D busies itself by forging new political allies in the depths of space. The team is meeting with galactic representatives from all over the universe and is trying to strike a deal with them to acknowledge Arakko as the capital planet of the Sol system in exchange for a generous supply of their new metal, Mysterium, which, if anyone's ever read Atlas Shrugged, feels a lot like Rearden metal in that it's basically indestructible and can do pretty much anything. The most exciting part of the issue comes at the end, though, when Dr. Doom demands to know who the representative of the new planet is, and Storm makes her S.W.O.R.D debut as Regent of Mars. This is a very exciting development for me, as I had theorized a while ago that Storm was going to be moving to Mars, and so I'm super excited for her to have this huge new platform. The issue ends with a random appearance by the Scarlet Witch, and because it's so out of the blue for her to just show up in this S.W.O.R.D issue, it was pretty much a spoiler to me anyway that she was going to be the one who was murdered. We don't see that happen here in this issue though, and instead it's just a happy reunion between her and her one-time father, which I was really happy to see because I think their bond is super special regardless of what Marvel decides to retcon it. I thought this issue was really good overall, even though it was just a bunch of talking without any action, which I know I diss a lot of, but this is how you do it right. It was talking that serviced the overall plot of the gala and moved the stories forward as opposed to just being random vamping dialogue between characters. I mean, the Captain America and Dr. Doom parlay off the top did get things off to a really slow start. I am certainly not reading X-Men to see either of these two characters take up 4 pages of dialogue, and I'm hardly one to care about any of Steve Rogers' motivational speeches. I hope this wasn't meant to inspire any sort of sympathy or whatever for Captain America, because in the world of X-Men versus Avengers, readers of this book are most likely going to side with the mutants. So giving Steve this sad little monologue about his past and his ideals only really served to make him even more annoying to me than he was before. But yeah, overall, S.W.O.R.D number 6 was a good read, and I gotta say, I'm looking forward to the next issue. Way of X. Way of X number 3 was a strange issue, but it's kind of a strange series, so I think it's able to get away with doing almost whatever it wants to do, because there's no real precedent for a title like this. Really, the big tie-in of this issue to the gala happens only at the beginning. Nightcrawler was shown as getting progressively more and more drunk in a lot of the other Hellfire Gala issues, so in this issue, we get to see the extent of his sloppiness as he traverses the party trying to preach the gospel of the mutant laws, and then he wakes up later with a roaring hangover. This issue is mostly like a post-Hellfire Gala issue. Most of it takes place over the course of the next day, or for some, a continuation of the night before. There's an after party that's happening on Mars where Legion helps Loa and Mercury out with some of their romantic problems, while Nightcrawler hangs out on Krakoa and investigates a new brothel and nursery that's being run by none other than Stacy X. I am really happy to have Stacy X back in the X books. I like her crass attitude, and I think she was really ahead of her time as a character during her initial appearances, and kind of underappreciated too, so I think that the time is ripe for her comeback. I don't really know what I think about her characterization in this issue though, because even though I'm down with her sentiment of providing safe spaces to procreate and just get it on, I don't ever recall Stacy being this articulate before, and I sort of feel like she's just being used to forward a philosophy as opposed to being used as a character. Overall, I liked this book, but I wouldn't say it was anything amazing. This book doesn't explicitly deal with anything that's super Hellfire Gala related, aside from the after party, but it's a cute cast of characters that are really fun to watch together, and I felt like I almost watched an episode of like Scooby-Doo Mysteries or something. I enjoy reading the exploits and the hijinks that this Way of X gang gets up to, and even if I don't think that this book is like a necessary book to have in the grand scheme of the X books, I welcome it because I welcome these characters, and so the more it dives deep into the X lore like it did in this issue, the better off it will be. I predict that Nightcrawler might be one of the mutants who sides with his mother Mystique in the upcoming Inferno storyline, as something about the way he's portrayed in this series makes him seem as though he's becoming disenchanted with either his faith or the Krakoan system, or maybe both. I love a good crisis of faith, so it's a plot point that I welcome, and I hope we get some good conflict out of it. X-Factor. Oof, what a messy way to close off the gala. X-Factor number 10 marks the end of the X-Factor series as a whole, which, 10 issues is a ridiculous number for any series to be capped at. It hardly gives a book time to find its footing, and even though I wasn't really a fan of this X-Factor book, I think it's a travesty to end it without any good reason. I'm not buying that Polaris leaving the team to join the X-Men is reason enough to cancel it, as lots of other teams have members leaving their ranks and their books aren't getting canceled, so I don't really know what the deal is here. Anyway, this book is just as chaotic as you would imagine because it tries to wrap up a bunch of story points without giving any of them a proper gestation period. This was the case for the past few issues of X-Factor, which, it's just what happens when a book is culled before it has matured. The main story in this book is about Prodigy finally discovering how he died, and it turns out that he was a victim of a serial killer who targeted young queer black men. I'm not even going to get into how he deduced his death because it's just a complicated mess of conveniences for the sake of wrapping up the story, which is a shame because I really liked this plot point. I thought it would be an interesting way to develop his character some more and maybe see him embrace a bit of darkness as he got angry and sought revenge. How it ended up getting resolved in the end wasn't great, in my opinion, a bit too cut and dry for my taste without any kind of character twists, but it is what it is. This issue also touches on Aurora and Daken's relationship, which was hands down the most boring part for me, and it also develops more of Eye-Boy's growing sense of self and power, which is great because Eye-Boy was actually the standout of this entire series for me, though he's starting to edge on being a bit too powerful now. Hectic story wrap-up aside, this issue falls short of being like a great climactic finish of the Hellfire event overall for me too. Even though we get the reveal of the Scarlet Witch's death at the end, that didn't feel like it was organic to this issue at all, and it felt more like it was just an add-on that could have been an ending of any of the other books. Aside from Prodigy's storyline, which I did like, the whole rest of the cast felt like they basically did nothing for this entire issue. It was another book of just people talking at a party, which is what I think the Hellfire Gala event suffered from in the early issues, so it was a shame to see it revisit that template again for the final issue, particularly after a series of tie-ins that had really given us some fun action and adventure. I'm not really sad to see X-Factor go, but I am sad to see it go in this way, and I kind of wish that they hadn't bothered wrapping up the stories that they began so that they could have revisited them at a later date and given them more depth in some sort of future series, even if it was going to happen years from now. So that's my Hellfire Gala roundup of all the issues involved in the event. If we're going to look at the big takeaways, then we've got Terra Verde and the UK cutting diplomatic ties with Krakoa, the Braddock Lighthouse moving to Krakoan soil and Morgan Le Fay being freed, Gabby, Pete Wisdom, Christian Frost, and the Scarlet Witch all being murdered, a new team of X-Men being announced, and of course, the terraforming of Mars and Storm being announced as its regent. I think these are all fun developments to come out of an okay event, and as I said before, at the very least, we got a great fashion show out of it. I know Marvel said that the Hellfire Gala was to be an annual event, but I really hope it's more of a behind-the-scenes party in the future, as opposed to being the super tie-in mega event that this inaugural ball was. It just didn't scratch the itch that it was promised to scratch for me, so even though everyone was pretty and there were some great moments to come out of it, I'm happy for it to be a one-and-done style event. If you made it to the end of this video, then congratulations, and thank you for sticking with it. I create lots of review-style videos like this one, so be sure to browse around my channel if you enjoyed the experience and want to see more. You can also follow me on social media for non-video content, which is mostly just me posting panel scans that I find cool or funny with some light-hearted captioning. Thanks again for stopping by and tuning in today, and be sure to come back again soon for more great X-Mentations.